first off, can you give us a sense of the impact these tariffs would have on your city and the country as a whole?
Well, they'll absolutely be consequential, and we know that in my city, we are home to the busiest commercial border crossing between the United States and Canada. So the Ambassador Bridge carries a full quarter of all trade between our two countries each and every day, almost $400 million, in fact, each and every day. And so border cities like mine and the Border Mayors Alliance is all about unity and making sure that we're on the same page, because our communities are going to be hit first. We're going to be hit the hardest. And it's going to be a very challenging impact on all of our communities coast to coast if a 25% tariff is put in place.
So when we're talking there, and you've touched on it as well, in particular, why communities and the communities that have banded together in this alliance on why it is that they particularly want to focus on this as a collective group, just how high are the stakes for those border cities?
They are extremely consequential. And so I like to use the example in my city, and there are many across the country, but in the auto sector, in the auto industry here, there is really no car that is built in Windsor, which is the auto capital of Canada, or in the Motor City, Detroit, across the river. No car is purely built in one city. We really are a product and a supply chain that is tightly integrated. So the average part that goes into a vehicle, whether it rolls off the assembly line in Detroit or in Windsor, has crossed the border for continuous improvement on average 7 times. And that speaks to the regional relationship that we've developed between Windsor and Detroit in our area, but those regional relationships exist across our country. And so the Border Mayors Alliance is about bringing mayors together to be able to link arms and say, hey, we're unified. We know there's some disruption and distraction at the federal level. We know the Premier of Ontario is working diligently to get the premiers on the same page. Make no mistake, the border mayors are absolutely aligned, wanting to link arms to find a solution here and make sure that we're expressing the concerns for our communities, but also making sure we can be part of the solution, linking arms with mayors across the border in the United States who have a shared interest in this. At the end of the day, this is a trade war. If this happens, it'll be a trade war, and there will be casualties on all sides, and that's the last thing we want to see.
Now, in terms also of some of the remarks that we've heard from the U.S. president, he certainly said we don't need Canadian cars as part of his statement to the World Economic Forum yesterday. Certainly, that is something that would impact your community. What sort of conversations have the mayors already had about what we've heard just within the first week of this presidency?
So we have met, the Alliance has met, and certainly we're just getting on the same page and making sure that we are aligned and wanting to move forward with this initiative. And we have mayors all the way from, the mayor of Surrey, BC, all the way to New Brunswick, with many, many stops in between. And so we absolutely want to make sure that our voices are heard, that we're speaking for our communities, and that we're assisting. We expect that at the federal level that there will be diplomatic talks at the federal level between Washington and Ottawa. We know the premiers are working their angles with governors, rightfully so, because many of the states in the U.S. call Canada the #1 customer of the goods produced here. And we want to link arms with our mayors on the other side because their communities have just as much to lose as ours. And so once we get past the euphoria, let's say, of a brand new president being elected, and the agenda sort of being set and 100 executive orders being issued, once the rubber hits the road, and if this happens, the impact will be dramatic. It will be almost instant, and there will be a need to have a response. And so let's get the group together today. Let's make sure we're creating those contacts, not just with mayors, in my case in Detroit, but with business leaders and associations like the Canada-U.S. Business Association here in Windsor, Detroit area. Those associations, those people, those groups exist across our country. Let's leverage these relationships that we have to have one unified voice and make sure that our voice is being heard and that everyone understands what the impact's going to be on both sides of the border. And it's not going to be pretty.
And let's talk for a moment on what you've said when it comes to one unified voice. And that's an interesting point that you make. Certainly, we know that it is a challenge, the fact that we do not have a federal leader with a long enough mandate to see us through this challenge. We know that the federal government, however, has already launched a Council on Canada-U.S. Relations to respond to the tariff threat. We know that they're also in constant contact with premiers. And now there is this mayoral alliance of border communities. How do we make sure that wires aren't crossed, that there is coordination between all of these different sort of groups that are seemingly have the same goal in mind, but working somewhat separately?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we certainly don't want to be at cross purposes with anyone else in Canada. We're about Canada first, making sure that we are helping assist in the efforts. We realize that at the municipal level, we can't issue countervailing tariffs or anything like that. We realize who has the authority to do that, but we want to be a resource to them. And so we're activated now. We're certainly, there's no mayor sitting at the federal table, and that's fine. They've chosen their group of folks that they think are best suited to deal with the issue from their perspective. But when called upon, we're going to be ready to assist to make sure that the interests of our communities are heard, certainly the interests of our provinces and our country are heard, and make sure that we link arms with the mayors on the other side of the border to activate them to be allies for us. Because again, the impacts on their communities are going to be just as dramatic on ours, where you're going to have significant cost increases on both sides of the border. And I just can't imagine a president wanting to do anything that would harm his own citizens. And so I think that reinforcement from mayors and governors is just as important as it is on the U.S. side as it is for us to do that work here.
I want to thank you very much for speaking with us today on this. Thank you, Mr. Dilkens.
My pleasure. Thank you.